Mary, can you set it so when people enter, they're on mute? Maybe.
Yeah, it already is.
So people who are not on mute
So
have
once we get once everybody enters, and then we just do the say hello and your name, and then I'll just put it so that they can't unmute.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. As folks are entering, we'll just slowly get started. So welcome everyone to an evening at Mission Dharma. We have a wonderful guest teacher for you tonight, Anushka Fernandopulle. And but before we get started, just as a way of sort of grounding ourselves in this field of Sangha, it's always, if you feel comfortable turning on your camera, by all means. And just the usual, just say your name and where you're joining us from today.
I'm another Howard, and I'm from the Sunshine Coast in British Columbia. Not a Howie, though. Typically.
And I'm a Jill, and I'm from Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada, in the northern Midwest, the northern Great Plains.
Hi, Jill. Hi, Howard.
Hi, I'm Mark. I'm over here in San Francisco. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Mark.
I'm Marcia, and I'm from Santa Rosa.
Hi, Marcia.
I'm Frank from San Francisco.
Good to see you, Frank.
From Berkeley.
I see you waving, Mary, but go ahead. Who is next?
I'm from Berkeley.
Hey, Keith. Good to see you.
And I'm Victor in San Francisco.
Wonderful.
Glenn in Palm Springs.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Mary from Santa Barbara. Sorry.
Good to see you, Mary. Anyone else want to say hello? John, I see you waving.
John from Chile, San Antonio this evening.
You.
I'm Ken over here in Palm Springs.
Welcome, Ken.
I'm Margot here in San Diego.
Oh,
Mike in Sausalito.
Mike. Anyone else care to say hello? Gone. Otherwise, I'm going to introduce the wonderful Anushka, who will be guiding us this evening. And if you haven't taken teachings from Anushka, you are in for a treat. So, Anushka, my dear.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Happy to see you. I am Anushka Fernandopulle. I actually live in San Francisco, in fact, in the Mission. So for Mission Dharma, I'm right on the spot where it was about 68 degrees Fahrenheit today. I don't know how to translate that for the Canadians, maybe 20 Celsius. Anyway, very warm and a beautiful day here in San Francisco. It's around this time that like rest of the US starts to get colder and colder and colder, and we continue to enjoy our moderate kind of. So I used to have an online group. Actually, I used to have an in-person group that was at CIS in a little outside the Mission in Soma. And then during the pandemic, I had an Instagram live group. But since the pandemic ended, I actually had folded my online group and have not done many Zoom sessions. So I'm a little rusty in the Zoom Dharma world here. Try and get back on it here. And I'm happy to get to be with you today as Howie is away. So we'll start with some meditation together and just help to settle the mind, settle the heart, connect with our awareness of the body, emotions, mind. Howie and I are from the same tradition of insight meditation, so should be somewhat familiar. So to begin with, again, take our seat, and you're already in your seat. So what does that mean? It's take the seat with awareness. So bringing awareness to connect with the body sitting here. As simple as just feeling the butt on the chair, cushion, bench, as you have it. You can just feel that pressure. You might feel your feet on the ground. You can take a moment to bring presence into this body, embodiment, which we might have lost at some points during the day, during this life. You can feel a sense of the body sitting, wherever it's easiest for you to notice that. I feel like you can do a brief scan of the body. So feel whatever there is to feel around the head and the face. You can see if we can bring a quality of loving awareness, kind awareness to whatever that we meet there. Bringing the attention to the neck and the shoulders. You can try to let go of any unnecessary tension that's being held in the shoulders. around the face. Can bring awareness to the torso, to the chest, belly. We can include feeling the back, upper back, lower back, sides of the body. You can connect with awareness to the arms, the right arm, elbow, hand, and all the fingers. And then we can include the left arm. And all the fingers. Can bring awareness to our butt where we're sitting, groin, and then on to the upper legs, knees, lower legs, and the feet and toes. So just connecting with a sense of kind awareness to this body sitting. You might notice the body breathing. Just do this as it happens naturally. You might notice other aspects of experience. Could be a sense of different emotions or thoughts coming and going. Could be different sounds in your environment. You can just let all of this flow through, arise, pass, coming and going. If you find yourself lost in thought, you can notice that. Just gently bring the attention back. Connecting with this body breathing, body sitting. Just resting at ease. If, as we practice, you can notice how fully present you might be. You can notice the quality of this attention. Just trying to sink into being fully present, not straining or struggling. Just dropping down, sinking in. Just this, just resting at ease as best you can. Just noticing where your attention is, resting at ease. whatever it is that you're aware of. It's possible to meet that with a sense of mindfulness, of heartfulness, just recognizing what it is. Noticing how everything that arises also shifts, changes, passes. To end our sitting, I'm going to chant the refuges and the precepts in Pali. You can feel free to just listen, continue with your practice, or if you want to chant along, you can too. Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammang saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddhang saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammang saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Sanghang saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammang saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami. Panatipata Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. Adinadana Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. Kamesu Michachara Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. Musawada Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. Suramereya Vajapamadatana Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. Idam me silam Magafalanyana Pachayo hotu. So welcome to Mission Dharma. Maybe I will turn it back to Mary for announcements. Is this the time for that to happen?
Yep, that works. Thank you, Anushka. So welcome everyone. So I want to tell you about a couple of retreat opportunities with Howie. One is we finally have the registration ready for the half-day retreat, which is Saturday, January 25th, at the SF Dharma Collective. So for the local folks, you'll have an opportunity to practice in person from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturday the 25th. The name of the retreat is Stop, Listen, and Feel, an in-person half-day retreat with Howie. And then you have for everybody, there's an opportunity for an online retreat starting January 15th through the 19th, and that's called Freeing the Heart, Awakening Insight. And I will, in fact, let me just shoot these out right now. And then just a word about Donna. We're in 2025, and I believe this is the 40th, we're going to be starting the 40th year of Mission Dharma, which is just amazing. And the reason we've been here for 40 years because of generosity. Generosity of teachers like Anushka and of course Howie, the generosity of the volunteers and board members, and of course your financial generosity of the Sangha. So we wouldn't be here without you. So the information on how to offer, the details are on the screen. And yeah, thank you in advance for any generosity that you can offer. Always greatly appreciated. So I'm sending it back to you, Anushka.
Okay, great, thanks. Time for Dharma offering. And since this is the beginning of the year, I believe this is the first time you've met this year, right? Because January 7th. So welcome to your new year. it can be a good time in a variety of different ways when people tend to take stock of their lives and make plans and set goals and all this kind of thing. And, there's sort of a paradox in the Dharma or in practice where we're practicing to be present and to bring awareness to what's here in this moment, to not dwell in the past or reach for the future too much. And yet also, as evidenced by the announcements just made, planning actually has its purpose, practically speaking. So if you want to go to the retreat, or even if you wanted to come to the Zoom, you had to make a plan. You had to set in your calendar and then proceed to take the actions to make that happen. So in that vein, I thought it would be good to do some reflection about ways in which we can consider our practice or reflect on different aspects of our practice as we begin the year too. So first thing I want to talk about is, that which I chanted in the very beginning, or sorry, the very end of this sitting period, which probably is familiar to some of you who might have been on retreat before, the refuges and then the precepts. So the refuges, there's 3 refuges, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And the first one, I take refuge in the Buddha, is a reminder for us that there is the possibility of an awakened mind and heart. So in the Buddhist tradition, the Buddha was certainly the historical teacher, small statue right there in the picture, who lived in northern India in the 6th century BC, gave these genius teachings that have been passed on now for 2,600 years. Maybe I can even say 2,700 now and continue to be useful for humans today. But his personal name was not Buddha. So he had another name, Siddhartha Gautama. Buddha means the awakened one. So really, when we're taking refuge in the Buddha, if it's relevant for you, if you have some relationship to the Buddha as a teacher, you can use that. But also it can be just taking refuge in the possibility of an awakened mind. So then that leads us to what is an awakened mind. So I'm going to put a little tag on that, come back to that, all right? The possibility of an awakened mind. So it's a helpful reminder that, we do this practice not just out of sort of a habit in some ways, but there is a possibility of change. There's a possibility of learning, of seeing through delusion, of actually uprooting afflictive habit patterns that are there for us. So this is a good reminder for us about that. Second one, I take refuge in the Dhamma. So the Dhamma is the teachings of the Buddha, but another translation of Dhamma is actually nature. So the truth of the way things are. So everything that the Buddha taught is about aspects of how things work in our experiential world, you could say, or in the way that the mind-heart interacts, and particularly about aspects that lead us towards suffering or towards freedom. And this Dhamma is an aspect of nature, which I find very encouraging because in some ways, like, we are a part of nature. All of us are part of nature, like as animals, as human beings. Our physical body is made up of the elements of nature. We'll return to nature. But also there's different aspects of nature and how things work in the world that we learn about as we grow older. So for example, we learn about gravity. So we learn about how things operate in the world when we're very small, so that if you try and place something in midair, it's going to fall to the ground. So if you try to place something in midair and it falls to the ground, when that first happens, if you're like a little kid, it's surprising. And you might see little kids sometimes sort of practicing tossing things down, watching them fall. What happens if it goes on this side? Like, oh, same thing. And what happens if you're not looking at it? Oh, same thing. And after a while, getting the picture that when you try to place something in midair, like this striker, it's going to fall to the ground. And you don't need to know why that is, or you don't need to know if someone is operating that law. You don't need to know the mathematical formula for it. All you need to do is try to understand how that operates and then live in harmony with that. So like that, we try to learn the Dhamma. The Dhamma has highlighted aspects of the experiential life we have as humans, the way things operate, you could say, in nature, that can help us to not suffer as much. So for example, here I have this glass of water. If I try to place this in midair, it will surely fall. It'll cause splashing, perhaps short circuit my computer, and then the Zoom will be over, cause a mess, right? Wet all the papers around me. So living in harmony with nature in this particular way, law of gravity, means I'm placing this on a surface. I'm placing it on the desk, on a coaster, in fact, because I also understand the law of water ring stains on wooden desks. So then it's able to not have as much splashing, mess, friction. So in this way too, there are aspects of our lives that we haven't tuned into fully, and thus we do not honor, we do not live in harmony with, we don't live in accordance with, in the way that by now most of us as adults have learned to live in accordance with the law of gravity. And I'll say that, it's not that as adults, like things don't sometimes fall, like sometimes you're somewhere and something falls off a shelf or you drop something. But the thing is, because you've understood this law, this natural law, it doesn't surprise you, right? So it doesn't stress you out. You're like, oh yeah, okay. And you just pick it up and put it back. And then you don't need to spend a lot of time being like, why me? Why now? Why is this happening? Right? Like you understand that's just how things operate and you've learned to live in accordance with that. So we take refuge in the Dhamma. So we do our best to try to learn and understand these laws of nature and to live in alignment with that. More on that when we get to the precepts. Third refuge, I take refuge in the Sangha, is I take refuge in the community of practitioners, and particularly those who have actually realized the teachings over this course of the Buddha's dispensation, you could say. So basically that it is actually possible to reach some alignment with the Dhamma, some kind of alignment like you have with the law of gravity, such that you do not suffer, or at least that you will suffer much, much, much less, certainly is very attainable from lay people in this life, in this time. So there's members of the community across thousands of years and across tens of thousands of miles who have brought these teachings towards us. So for me, for Howie, we've both practiced in Asia. My family is originally from Sri Lanka, so I practiced there as well as in the US with lay teachers, with monastic teachers. And then those teachers had teachers, those teachers had teachers, and so on and so forth, all the way back to the Buddha. So we're fortunate to have all of this kind of transmission going through, and taking refuge in the Sangha is, some appreciation for this lineage of realized practitioners. That also has come to mean taking refuge in the Sangha as sort of taking refuge in community. And this is also a valuable and important dimension of our practice. So I'm happy to hear that, besides the Zoom community, that you have opportunities now through Mission Dharma to get to meet in person, to meet on retreat, and so on. So that's the 3 refuges. And you might have noticed that we did them 3 times. And sometimes people ask, why do you do them 3 times? And it's hard to say. Maybe it's because in case you spaced out on the first time, then you'll get it the second time. If you spaced out during the second time, maybe the third time. But to me, it's actually sort of a reminder that there's something larger than just me and my meditation technique. Which sometimes it can be easy to sort of fall into if you're trying to, be a good practitioner or, something like that. There's a way in which remembering these kind of bigger frames for our practice can help you to plug into a larger source of current, a larger source of energy, as well as in some ways, like when you get really desperate and lost and struggly about anything, practice or life, you can actually remember, like, oh, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dhamma, I take refuge in the Sangha, right? Like, make that your help button that you can use. I'm looking at my computer now, there's a little help thing in the corner of the Zoom workplace. It's like, oh, I don't know how to mute or unmute, so you can go to that. So you can try to remember this taking refuge it can be a form of help, of sort of like laying things down and getting some broader framing. So back to the some aspects that I mentioned briefly in the previous part. So about this Dhamma and alignment with the Dhamma. So the precepts, the guidelines or training guidelines, recommended guidelines for us as lay people, are actually part of what it is to live in harmony with the Dhamma. So when we're not aligned with the Dhamma, when we're out of harmony, we have this sense that there's me and there's people around me and I'm struggling with them, and it's always like a fight to win or lose, always in a struggle like that. Whereas actually when we start to tune in, we can recognize like, oh, there are actually all these other living beings around. And just as I have my struggles and things that I want and need, and I would like to be treated in certain ways, so do all these people, you know, so does everyone around, the animals, the people. So there's a recognition of the lives around us, the ways we impact each other. So if we really fully understood that, then the precepts, you could say, is kind of a description about how we would already act, as well as a description about how we would act if we came from the awakened mind, the Buddha, right? So the first one that I said, this Panatipata Veramani Sikkapadam Samadhyami, I undertake the training to refrain from killing living beings or destroying life. So that's a good one to take. You know, if you're looking for New Year's resolutions, undertake the training to refrain from destroying life. So that's killing both people, but actually also animals, and, you know, even on a smaller scale, even insects. So what this calls upon us is to notice when some urge for aggression arises within us, and to become aware of that, with a lot of compassion, not to judge oneself as bad or wrong for that arising, but to be very, very, you could say, delicate when that arises, to be very sensitive about that, to notice how much that harms yourself, even as that comes up, and then also how much it harms the other if you enact that. And that can be enacted physically, it can be enacted through words. Sometimes it's easier for us to reflect on this about times when others have acted with aggression towards us, right? And it could have been, you know, even times when you were very, very small. And those memories stay with us because it's very difficult, right, to be the recipient of violence, of aggression like that. So one of the greatest gifts that we can give to each other, the Buddha said, is the gift of feeling safe in each other's presence. So taking a vow to be someone who others can feel safe around. And one aspect of this certainly is to be someone who the others can feel like, oh, I'm not going to get physically harmed by this person. This person's not going to be violent towards me. Now, of course, with each of these precepts, there's a kind of other side of it, which is not just the refrain from doing the violence, but actually you could take a vow to protect life. To actually say, like, oh, I undertake the training to protect life when I see an opportunity to protect those around me. Even if I'm not the one doing the violence, like I'll actually contribute to a safer world like this. Second precept, Adina Dana Veramani Sikkapadam Samadhyami. I undertake the training to refrain from taking that which is not freely offered. So commonly called stealing, but the framing of this is to recognize when there is some urge of greed or acquisitiveness that comes up within us, and be aware of that, be very aware of that, and notice what that can make you do, and to take the vow to renounce that, to let go of that. So the taking what is not freely offered means even to pay attention to how much we're taking up that has been given to us in some ways, like not through lawful means, right? So how much space do we take up? How much energy do we take up? How much resources do we take up? You know, we can see for ourselves even how much resources we take up in the world. Some of that is conditioned by our position, what country we're born in, or what our government has been doing in other ways. Well, we can tune into that and notice, like, okay, there are these messages about what I need, but what do I really need? What is really actually something that I should have? And the counter side to this is generosity. So what can I be generous with? What can I offer? Both of resources, of objects, of time, of energy, right? So recognizing the pain that's caused from stealing, from anytime something's been stolen from you. Actually, today I was walking down the street here in the Mission, and I saw something that looked like a passport on the ground, and I picked it up, and it was in fact a passport. And then nearby I saw a driver's license and a Social Security card, and it was right outside the new Social Security building on 16th Street. Some of you are aware of that. So I picked them all up and I handed them to the guard, and I was like, someone probably came down here to try to do something with these, and either their bag was stolen, their car was broken into, something. But I felt for that person, because if you have ever lost your significant ID, especially when you're trying to do something that requires them, it can be very, very disconcerting, right? A lot of difficulty for you. So you can remember times when something has been stolen from you or broken or something like that, and what distress that's caused you. And in that way, then we can notice, again, we don't need to judge ourselves, but when some acquisitive urge comes up, think like, oh, maybe that's not for me, right? The Buddhist framing also includes this, if you're not sure it's for you. So it's like encouraging you to be like very, very honest and like very, very aligned with integrity about what it is that you're going to get or not. I was at a retreat center in England, and I was there as a teacher. And at some point I was doing my laundry there, and I realized like, I got permission to use the laundry machines, but I didn't explicitly get permission to use the laundry soap, right? So I actually went and found someone and asked them, and they were like, yeah, of course you can use the laundry soap. And so later I thought, why did I do that? Because it probably was true that I could use the laundry soap, but I was like, oh, I didn't want there to be that flicker of a doubt that's like, oh, am I doing something I'm not supposed to be doing? Or I know that feeling of like, oh, am I doing something that sort of like, if someone caught me doing this, this would be considered bad, right? So it's like always better to like just clear it up, have a clear conscience, know it's really offered, and then continue, right? Buddha actually talked about sort of hiri and otapa, these two different aspects that could be seen as afflictive emotions, of basically like having a conscience, and then also of, in some ways, like being worried about what would people think if I did this bad thing and they saw me. And these are actually considered good things. These are considered the guardians of the world. So they help us with these kind of things that flow through that otherwise might kidnap us and make us do things we later regret. Third one is the precept around sexual energy, sexual activity. I undertake the training to refrain from harm with my sexual activity and sexual energy. And we know in the world that there can be so much beauty and pleasure from sexual energy and activity, but also so much pain has been caused. So much of oppression of children, so much oppression of adults within relationships, outside of relationships. So it's like recognizing that we as humans have this force within us. It's not that this is bad, but it can be very powerful. And so to become aware of what that is and how we use that in the world, how we interact with others, how we interact with ourselves. Yeah, lots to say about that. But let's keep it, we'll keep it at that for a moment. Paying attention to this, I appreciate that the Buddha talked about this. So the monastics are celibate, but as lay people, we don't have to be celibate. You can if you want to be, that's perfectly fine choice to make. But if you are not, then it's actually really helpful to tune in and to notice how you act with others. Now, again, this is something that we might notice more when others are acting towards us in a way that makes us feel uncomfortable, in a way that makes us feel unsafe or, in some way coerced or something like that. So it's helpful to tune into that energy of our animal life, you could say. Fourth precept is the precept around speech. So I take the training to refrain from unwholesome speech. That means false speech. That means any speech that is harsh or abusive. That means any speech that is slanderous, gossipy, slanderous speech, or even unnecessary speech. Now, if you're looking for kind of like resolutions around the precepts to make, and so far you've been hearing them and you're like, oh, I'm good. 1, 2, 3, so far good. Almost everyone has something to pay attention to in this fourth one around speech. And it could be something as subtle as, do you exaggerate? When you go somewhere and you come back and tell your friends, you're like, oh, there was thousands of people there. Like, oh, why did I say that? You have to think about that. Like, oh, was I trying to make an impression? Was I trying to make people listen to me more? Like, interesting. There's a lot of subtlety around this, with harsh abusive speech, there's the overt kind of cussing someone out, screaming at someone, abusive speech, but there's also sort of like sarcastic speech. This is like a cultural habit of the Gen Xers, which I am. I have to say, there's like the humor of sarcastic humor. But you could notice like, oh, it's actually like the biting quality of it does have an impact. So tuning into that. Gossip, slander, very interesting to notice how much of our time gets spent on this, whether it's direct speech or even consuming things too that are about other people's relationships or, basically things that are like none of our business or things that we're passing on that's really none of our business. So yeah, just noticing when we're causing discord in that way. And then the last one, which is around unnecessary speech, very interesting one to pay attention to. With all of these ones around speech, you can also pay attention to this, not just in verbal speech, but in clickety-clackety-clack speech or tippity-tappity-tap. So in your electronic speech, right? Emails, texts, all of that. Because now so much of our communication is done through that, and all of these still apply, right? So this last one, unnecessary speech, is like, am I leaving space both for myself to be in silence, to be tuned in, to be sensitive, but also am I leaving space for others to communicate? Am I leaving space to listen with full, wholehearted listening? And then fifth training is I undertake the training to refrain from intoxicants that cloud the mind. So paying attention to our use of drugs, alcohol, not prescription drugs, but more like recreational drugs. And here, again, to be very compassionate, to notice what's the urge to use these, what is my relationship to these, and to be very honest with yourself about that. Like when I feel some call to have a drink or to take whatever recreational drugs, what is it that's driving that? Is it like I'm feeling lonely? Am I feeling like peer pressure? Am I feeling bored? What's any of that that's going on? And really tune into that with a lot of kindness, compassion. Try to build up some good habits for yourself, for your own heart and mind. Now, interestingly, when you look at the Eightfold Path, which is a whole nother framework many of you are probably familiar with, the precepts are there. The wise speech is its own link on the Eightfold Path, and wise action, which includes the first 3 of the precepts. But the 5th one doesn't seem to turn up there. The main reason for it in the precepts is that if you drink or too much alcohol, or you will take any other kind of drug that will cloud the mind, basically your best intentions of following numbers 1 through 4 go out the window, right? So, probably many of you have done or said something at some point in your life that you regret that had to do with substances, right? Or again, even if you haven't done it, you have probably been the recipient of some behavior or speech from someone who was not fully in their right heart and mind due to substances. So just tuning into that, and is, again, part of creating the sort of safety of the world for all of us. And there are many different kind of versions of the precepts, and this last one, I appreciate the articulation of Thich Nhat Hanh, who talks about paying attention to your diet for your mind and your heart and your body. So for the intoxicants is also talking about what movies do I watch, or what songs do I listen to, or what websites do I go to, and what's the impact of that on my heart and mind. And talking about trying to practice kind of a diet, so to speak, for the body and for the mind and heart that is healthy for yourself, for the benefit of your family, your community, and the broader world too. So these are kind of, for some of you who have been practicing for a long time, I know this is 40th anniversary of Mission Dharma. Maybe you've heard this many, many times before. But yeah, I think it's helpful for us in the beginning of the year to take stock, do some kind of, as they say, like a fearlessly honest self-assessment on these, and see, is there any area that I want to try to pay attention to in my life? Now, if you want to pay attention to all of them, even for a refresher, I think that's very admirable. And you could even decide, like, for each week, I'm going to pay attention to one and really tune into that particular precept of like how this plays out in terms of my own life, my own actions, as well as what I see around me. What's the impact? What I see in the news, what I see in stuff I watch, what I see when I'm on the bus, what I see in my family, all of that. And all of this can help in some ways sort of like ground us more deeply in our sincere efforts to be aligned with the truth, with the Dhamma, the truth of the way things are. So maybe I will stop there and see if there are any questions. Thank you for your listening to the Dhamma. And let's see, for the questions, maybe you can raise your hand. I think I don't see the whole screen. So if you can raise your virtual hand, that's probably the easiest. And either me or Mary will see you and then call on you and then invite you to unmute if you'd like. So I'll first ask for questions, and then if there are not questions, then I will ask if anyone wants to give a public shout out to what they want to pay attention to or what's of interest to them. Okay, no questions. So let people, if anyone wants to say what they want to pay attention to or what was most interesting to them. Stephanie, yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I could not find my virtual Zoom hand, so I just had to raise my real hand.
Yeah, those of you on screen, I think I can see you. So yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I really, I've been thinking. I appreciate the subtleties or the nuances of the different precepts that you mentioned, and so one of the things that I'm thinking about now, having heard those, is paying attention to speech, in particular, because I think it's not, even though I don't yell at people or, just like really big or obvious bad speech. There's definitely a lot of subtlety to pay attention to in just daily interactions with people. And I have noticed sometimes things I think afterwards, like, why did I say that? Or where did that even come from? And the additional aspect of having compassion for yourself when you are reflecting on it. That's hard for me to do. So that's something I'm going to work on. So thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think both are helpful. Like one is the subtlety of it, because sometimes it can be like you're not going to ream someone out, but you're going to speak to someone with some irritation, and like people notice that. Like we're energetically sensitive beings, right? That has an impact. So if you, even if the person doesn't say anything to you, if you yourself go leave that interaction or like, why did I do that? I should, then it's good to yeah, tune into that. And if you have an ongoing relationship with the person, even to actually apologize for it, or resolve for yourself to do better. So that's the thing with this, with all of these, they're not like you expect once you've heard them that you're going to do it perfectly, but they're training guidelines. So it's like we break them and then we learn from them, and so then we can like resolve to do better, sort of like learn from it, and then resolve to be more aligned. And one of the reasons that it's a helpful continuing path is because there's all the subtlety. There's the external action, but really it's tuning into the mind states, the heart states, right? Like to catch yourself before you say something irritable that is actually like a long-standing habit pattern that you have, and that might have even been inherited from like habit patterns of your family or your community, your culture, all of that. Like it takes a lot of sensitivity to tune in and to be aware. So now we're aware of like energetic movements that are much more subtle than, something like very vigorous, right? With speech. But even with all the other ones, like, oh, can I notice when I first start to get irritated, when the first moments of like aggression come, or, if the intention to kill arises for an insect and it's just like a habitual thing, right? It's like, oh, do I notice the beginnings of that twitch, right? Can I tune into that? And, with all of it, it's like related to the three characteristics: impermanence and not self, insubstantiality. All of these different states come and go, right? So you might get kidnapped by some kind of passing cloud of aggression in the moment. And that's all it is. It's not like I am bad, I am evil, or something like that. It's like, oh, look, in that moment, like I got duped by that and got kidnapped by that energy, acted and spoke from it. And look, it's had these negative impacts on others, on myself. So part of it is actually allowing yourself to kind of feel the burn of it, which isn't that much fun to do, maybe, but allowing yourself to feel the sting of that is actually really helpful. So thanks. I see Victor's hand.
Oh, hi. Thank you for your speech. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the summary of the main precepts that you shared with us. The question I have is, in an effort to continue practicing or learning from the Dharma, I mean, there's so much literature from different authors and different traditions within the Buddhist traditions. And so I guess my question is, does it matter if you venture into books from different traditions, in the sense that are you supposed to follow a specific Buddhist tradition at least for a while, as opposed to be going from one book to another one and just yeah. So I don't know if more of an Buddhist identity, wanting to say, oh, I belong to this tradition or lineage as opposed to these other ones.
Right. Yeah, good question. What's been your experience so far? Like, how long have you been coming to this group, or what's been your experience with different Buddhist groups?
I haven't been consistent, so I'm totally honest, but I've been practicing meditation on and off throughout the years, and I have tried different traditions, and I like it. I mean, I read Thich Nhat Hanh, and I practice Blue Diamond Buddhism, and which is Mahayana, I believe, the tradition.
Mhm.
Also this group, and I really like it. So usually my questions, more than having a question, is just the desire, or I need to tell myself that I need to be more consistent. But as you
Yeah,
know, things happen in life, and
right.
there are times when there are months when you're more active, more involved, and there are times when you're just taken off the path. And now I'm trying to come back.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say like of the topics that I talked about today, like the refuges and the precepts, that's something that probably is like somewhat similar in the different traditions, and yet they might have sort of different angles on it. So like I've enjoyed myself reading like some Zen reflections on the precepts and things like that, right? So that more can sometimes help to like expand one's understanding, and by and large they're like similar. On the other hand, when you come to the meditation technique, I would say that that's where different traditions have different techniques. And then even within one tradition, like within this is insight meditation of the Theravada tradition, but I mean insight meditation, there are many sort of like sub techniques you could be doing. So it just gets confusing if you're trying to follow like many different techniques at the same time. Kind of in the same way that like just for training's purposes, it's good to the metaphor that's often given is like, do you want to dig like 5 holes 1 foot deep, or like 1 hole 5 feet deep, or something like, it's like this is like if you're looking for water, or maybe if you're trying to bury something. I don't know, actually, something like, anyway, it's like better to get like deeper with one, and then well established in that, and then with some sort of facility in that, then there's the ability to like branch out a little bit more technique wise. So I guess as far as your practice itself, my encouragement is actually to kind of settle into one and like go deep in that. And I don't know if you've gone on retreats before, like day longs or like multi-day ones or anything like that, if you have the opportunity. Yeah. So like whichever one it is, of course, I think our one is really good. So, but, whichever one it is, then like, yeah, follow that for a while. And then, yeah, but as far as, reading books about this other stuff, I think it's okay if it's, as long as it's not confusing to you, for sure. Yeah. Mary.
Yeah.
Mission Mary.
Mission Dharma Mary. Yeah, I really appreciate this reminder at the beginning of the year, because my experience with the precepts has been, I remember when I first took them years ago, it was kind of like, oh, check, I don't kill things, I don't steal things, I'm not promiscuous, and and I don't drink, I don't smoke, and I thought the only thing I have to work on is my speech, otherwise I'm just perfect. And just my experience is that over the years, you just start discovering all the subtleties of it, and it's like, oh, I can take this yet another layer, So I think for this year, when I was thinking about this, particularly about the substances, it's like, I don't do drugs or drink, but it's like I do like my true crime shows. And so it's like, is that wholesome? I could be watching something that's a little bit more nourishing to my soul. So, yeah, I just appreciate that reminder to sort of just keep spiraling around it and just letting the onion just open more and more layers with it.
And yeah, and if one can go in the sort of harm reduction model too, where it's like you don't have to cut out all the true crime shows, but it's like, all right, how much do I watch? How many hours am I binging it? Or just like that. And then, I mean, also with something like that, not to pick on true crime, but like I notice in shows where there's like murder, where there's actually is like violence, it actually can have an impact on the heart, to watch that. And I think like as the decades have rolled on, like in media, in order to make something more flashy, like they've gotten more and more grisly in the depiction of such things, And yeah, it's if you find it that it's hard to watch some of these things, and then you feel like, oh, but everyone else likes that show, I must, like trust your own heart with those things, and tune into that. Uh, yeah, for sure. Another helpful thing that came to me from what you said was like, sometimes we think we're doing fine in like a variety of areas, but sometimes it can be good to like check in with others, and and be like, hey, I'm doing a little like beginning of the year inventory about my behavior actions in these areas. So I actually have friends who do this like in a very formal, like they give people sort of like little Google forms to fill out, about like, has anything I've done in this area impacted you? Like, and it would be around like speech or around this or generosity, blah, blah, and then, I guess they send it to enough people that it's going to be anonymous. And then they say like, can I follow up with you or whatever? And yeah, because maybe we miss some things, maybe we think we're perfect in some areas, but other people are like, you know what, actually, you always borrow things, you never return them on time, or something like that. Or so it's good to tune into that. Sometimes things that we think are not a big deal are actually a big deal to others. So it could be helpful sometimes to get some feedback. Yeah, but thank you. So yeah, I got, let's see, I see a hand, an actual hand. Seema, is it Seema? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Anushka. I haven't heard you give a Dharma talk in years, and I was really pleased. I found out you were doing it tonight. So when you mentioned sarcasm a bit earlier, I went through a major, and I mean like big, major change in my life when I became a Buddhist, particularly around this aspect of right speech. I'm from New York. I don't have to think about sarcasm. I mean, I hadn't thought about sarcasm. I thought sarcasm was an act of friendliness. I didn't hear the hostility. I mean, it just, it was how I talked. It was how we talked. Everybody talks like that there. And then when I moved here, totally different coast. Not that there aren't people who are sarcastic out here, but it's minimal. It's so minimal. I didn't even know it's been claimed as a Gen X thing. I mean, we were doing it when back, way back, everything. And I've over the years slowly been paying attention to that aspect of my speech and have been changing it. Because what happened was people who I knew when I was living back east, but I knew people at college who were from California or other states or whatever, would get very hurt when I said something sarcastic to them. And I felt so apologetic. I said, you don't know, it's like it's just how I speak. I love people who I'm sarcastic to. And when I think about that, the transition I had to go through to hear what it sounds like to other people who didn't grow up in the same region of the country that I did. Wow. Huge, 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 huge. So
Yeah.
I'm still sarcastic, but when I'm sarcastic, I mean, it's very minimal, actually. Occasionally I'm sarcastic because I really want to get a negative point across. And um and even then it's a cop out. It's not criticizing somebody straight directly. It's saying the criticism trying to sound like you're a jolly good fellow.
Right, right.
And so it's really a kind of form of lying also. But
Yeah, but the whole area of joking is a very interesting one to pay attention to. And I mean, both like when you're consuming sort of like, comedy shows and stuff like that, like so many of them I find very difficult to watch because the humor is like very harsh and
yes,
abusive, punching down on people or something like that. Or even like there are very commonly accepted ways of joking. For example, saying something that's false and then saying just kidding, right? But that's actually a way of like lying and then coming back and saying like, oh, I'm just kidding. but it's like in that moment you've set the person off balance, like you've set the person off balance, and then they don't know if they can trust what comes from your mouth anymore.
Right.
Or similarly, like people sometimes will insult each other and then say like, "Oh, I'm just joking," right? Like that, like directly, harshly insult each other. And it's like, "Oh no, that's just the way that but it still has an impact on each other,
It
It's
does, a big
like,
impact.
yeah. So yeah, it's good to tune into this stuff. And as we become more kind of sensitive and, every aspect of culture, different cultures, East Coast, West Coast, whatever national cultures, they have aspects that are functional, healthy, positive, and then they have aspects that are dysfunctional, right?
Yeah.
And we learn them and replicate them, but they aren't always great. So yeah, it can be hard to change these patterns though, because the patterns of speech are like, you've been practicing them since you was like, 1.5 years old or something like that. And yeah, but it's worthwhile because, all of this, it seems like this is for some people might seem like, oh, this is like very like basic Mickey Mouse kind of practice. But we're getting at the intentions of the afflictive intentions, the greed, hatred, delusion. It's like learning to tune into that, learning not to collude with that.
That's right.
Not to reinforce that, not to condition that over and over again. Actually, yeah, laying a new groove to freedom. So it's worth it. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. So maybe we're coming towards the end of our time here. Could it be? Anyone who is thinking they might ask something, say something, but hesitant, want to pipe up? Okay, Melinda. Yeah. Melinda's on mute.
I said, uh-oh, you found me.
Yeah.
So this is all the same topic. And I know I'm not the only one who does this, but of course I'm my own worst enemy. And I'm always focusing when I'm trying to grow and change, I'm always focusing it out, in the world with judgments or whatever that I have and what I want to clean up. And then I turn around and I'm constantly knocking myself, 20 steps below everybody else. So I don't know what I guess I don't know. That's just part of the whole topic.
Well, a good antidote to that is metta practice. You familiar with metta practice? Yeah. Yeah, metta practice is a very good antidote to that. So as well as paying attention to the precepts and all that, like doing a metta practice, like learning to cultivate that kind of channel of love, of goodwill, of friendliness, of well-wishing, because that's actually the basis of all these precepts too, is like actually acting with love, acting with kindness. So cultivating metta, and as a preliminary to cultivating metta, one of the preliminary practices right before you do metta is that you can reflect on your own goodness. So actually reflect on your own positive qualities, and allow yourself to really feel them, not in a sense of like, oh, I'm better than everyone in this way, but just like, oh yeah, that, I have these positive qualities and habits of kindness, of generosity, of compassion, of humor, of patience, of determination, thoughtfulness, could be anything. Could be one act that you remember, right? So allowing yourself to reflect on your own goodness and then connect with goodwill towards yourself and then extend it outwards.
Thank you for the reminder. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually going to teach a metta retreat on Friday at Spirit Rock, in fact. A week-long metta retreat there. I'm going in as a substitute teacher, but I teach usually a metta retreat in July in the summer every year. So this one is a 7-day, but we have in this summer a 9-day metta retreat followed by a 9-day vipassana retreat. So if anyone's interested in it's a good 1-2 kind of meditative experience. Develop concentration, collectedness of attention, and a sense of metta, and then apply that to insight. It's very good. So happy to get to spend this time with you. Would be happy to get to see any of you in person in other places. I have a Dharma website, anushkaf.org, probably was sent out in the little announcement, where you can see my schedule. I teach a lot at Spirit Rock, where I, like Howie, am among the core teachers, but also teach various others. Coming to Canada, actually, Vancouver. I orbit through there about once a year. Coming to Austin, Texas later this month. Teaching Honolulu and IMS on the East Coast and Gaia House in England. So wherever you are, will feel welcome to come. So maybe last thing we'll do is can reflect on our own goodness and share the merit from our practice here. So appreciating the opportunity to be together like this, appreciating your own good heart for taking the time to spend your evening in meditation and reflection with others, listening to Dhamma. So we share the blessings from our practice here and our time with the Dhamma with all beings everywhere, those we know, those we don't know. All animals, all people, all beings seen and unseen. May all beings be peaceful and happy. May all beings be strong and healthy. May all beings be safe from inner and outer harm. May all beings be free from suffering. So thank you. Mary, is there any other wrap-up things, or that's it?
That is it. And folks feel free to unmute and say farewell and thanks to Anushka. And
Thank you,
it.
Anushka. Yeah, Anushka.
Anushka.
Thank you,
Thank
Anushka.
you.
Thank you,
everybody.
Anushka. So glad you gave the talk tonight. Haven't seen you for years. Such
Thank
a
you.
pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Night, everyone. Thanks for being here. Happy New Year.
Thank you, everyone.
Not everyone.
Good night, Noemi.